In tonight's video, we have another professional tryout to announce, and we have some trade talk concerning teams like the Oilers, the Flames, the Senators, the Blues, and the Minnesota Wild. Will Kaprizov end in a trade, or will they come to an agreement? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of teams to talk about here today. We have one new PTO, no other official signings for actual contracts on the books here that we haven't already discussed. But the Ottawa Senators are bringing back Tyler Ennis on a professional tryout contract. We talked about Ennis a couple times recently, indicating that he could possibly have ended back in Edmonton, or the Vancouver Canucks apparently had interest as well. But he ends up going back to Ottawa, where he played just a couple seasons ago. Had a relatively productive year, mostly playing bottom 6 minutes. Ended up getting traded to Edmonton, where he then stayed for a while, and now finds himself as a free agent here yet again. So certainly could be a good fit. There had been rumors earlier in the offseason that the Sens were interested in either adding a potential center or maybe one more kind of depth winger. So I think the odds of him getting a contract, as long as he plays well, of course, and looks like he's still going to be able to contribute like he did before, should lead to a contract. I think the odds are pretty decent. Just be a one-year deal, likely somewhere between 700, 900,000, somewhere in that range. Most likely is what I see happening, but we'll see. But that certainly solves their potential question mark on what they were looking for there on a depth veteran winger. Now, the other thing with the Senators I want to touch on quickly here as well, a couple quick things. One, when it comes to Logan Brown, there's still a lot of word, even though he signed his qualifying offer and will be at training camp, but he still would prefer a trade. Of course, been in the organization for going on 5 years now. Has yet to really get a regular opportunity. But I do think that at this point, the Sens have made it clear they do not intend to just give him away. So if he does not have a good training camp, like I said before, for him to go to the minors, he now needs waivers. So that would give another team an opportunity to claim him. If he were to clear waivers, for example, that would send a message that there's really no teams interested, which we kind of already know that no teams were interested in a trade. And if no teams were interested in a waiver claim, well, then that just goes to show he needs more time to kind of reestablish and reprove himself here, since the last couple of years haven't been kind to him. But a lot of that is injury related. But apparently the back issues he's had are supposedly in the past. They've been dealt with. His back's feeling good. He's been having a good summer of training, so we'll see. I honestly think the Sens will keep him on the NHL roster without putting him through waivers. That way they can give him more of a look, see how things go, and try to see if they can mend this relationship and turn him into a legit player for them and go from there. Now, of course, quick update on the Brady Tkachuk contracts situation. We did get a few comments on the radio hit from Pierre Maguire, who's the director of player personnel. He said that right now that they've had 5 meetings with the Sens and the Tkachuk camp on the contract. They had another one scheduled for the weekend. Everything has been good. They each have their own ideas of what they're looking for in a contract, and talks are going to continue. But at this point, everything still seems very civil, and things are obviously not where they want them to be. But there's no reason to panic at all. I would still think that even if Tkachuk misses a little bit of training camp, it's really not a big deal. It seems to be quite common. We've seen many RFA negotiations go down to the wire like this when there's no arbitration eligible players, like there's early in their careers like this. This is quite common. So again, we'll see what happens. But according to Pierre Maguire, the first little bit of information we've kind of heard publicly from the Sens side, there's been all kinds of dialogue, which is certainly very encouraging, and they still grind away trying to get a long-term deal all locked up here. Now, when it comes to the other teams we want to talk about here today, I did want to talk quickly on the Edmonton Oilers. There was an article from the Edmonton Journal, David Staples, talking about, of course, the fact that they've recently signed Kailer Yamamoto, but longer term, even as early as next year with the cap situation the way it is, between Yamamoto and Jesse Puljujarvi, who are both going to need new deals again next year, that it seems possible, at least, that one of the two might have to be moved. They might have a tough time being able to keep both of them or find another player to trade. Of course, they don't have a ton of cap space. They have a lot of money already tied up. We're only looking at probably around $6.8, $6.9 million in space, but the cap could rise by $1 million next year as well. That could be a nice help for them to be able to consider keeping both players and not really having to do a lot by trade. They'll still have the Clefbaum contract. They can use a long-term injury reserve if necessary, but they're also going to need to address their goaltending as well. Obviously, Koskinen contract is up this year. We talked yesterday about the fact that they're likely going to continue to try to trade him if they can, but regardless, the contract's done this year. They have Mike Smith for one more year at $2.2 million, and they're going to need another goaltender, so they ideally would like to go out and find a more of a long-term solution, and that's going to take some dollars to do that. And so it's going to, if they do that, if they invest the money into that position, it's just going to create a situation that's tough to keep both of these guys. So they're kind of in a situation where it's going to depend on trade value and who fits better and all that. So hard to say. Now, another solution here, because they do have another player that to me would make more sense to trade, but it might be tougher to do with a little bit of term left and over $3 million a year, is Zach Kassian. Kassian could be a player that they probably would prefer to trade and keep both of these younger wingers. I mean, Puljujärvi obviously, got a slow start to his career, ended up coming back, fit nicely, seems to be progressing at a good pace, and I think could still have to be a legit top six winger for them long term. And I think Yamamoto has that potential as well. They just want to find some more consistency with him. And of course, they had a harder time coming to terms on a longer term deal, so they settled on a 1-year deal for now, just to see where things go. But at the end of the day, the Oilers, like many teams around the NHL, are certainly going to have their fair share of cap issues heading into next year and beyond because of the tight dollars. The cap's not expected to rise more than $1 million per year for a while. And of course, it's going to lead many teams to making very tough decisions. And trading Cassie might be a scenario where they might have to include like a sweetener, and that might prove difficult and might not be an area they need to go. So we'll see what happens. But certainly just kind of look into the future there in a deal that the Oilers might have to consider doing. Now, jumping to the provincial rival, the Calgary Flames, I want to look at some information from Eric Francis of Sportsnet. Now, of course, keep in mind, Eric Francis has been talking about Gaudreau from Calgary being on the move and not staying for quite some time, so kind of take this with a grain of salt, but I do think what he's saying here does kind of make sense. He talks a bit about the fact, like I said a few days ago, that the Flames obviously were expected to have a shakeup this offseason, didn't get it, but it wasn't from a lack of trying. It's due to the fact that a lot of the players they could consider moving just didn't have the value. Like I said, you get Sean Monahan coming off back-to-back down seasons, was having surgery as well. Yes, he's a still fairly young, former 30-goal scoring center iceman. Like there's value there, but just not at the moment. If he can come back and play better, recover from his injury, show that he can still be that guy, well, obviously that's potential for trade, but not right at the moment. Teams are going to want to see a little bit more before they make that investment. And of course, a guy like Johnny Gaudreau's got 1 year left on his contract. And ultimately, I think he's played more consistently. He's certainly an intriguing guy that teams would have interest in. But again, they might not want to pay a big price if they can't extend him. And obviously, we don't really know behind the scenes how contract talks have gone. But at this point, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of talk about a Gaudreau extension. I know at the end of the season, there was talk, mostly just comments from him, which you would expect anyway. Like I said before, you have to take what players and GMs say to the public and the media with a grain of salt, because they're trying to be a good teammate and a good member of the organization. They're going to say all the right things. They're not going to come out and say some things that they may not want to stay, or that some trying to trade so-and-so. They're not usually going to do that. They're going to tip their cap. It's going to create an awkward situation, and they don't want that. So the Flames, where they did not get their shakeup, a lot of these guys are going to be expected to come back and show that they can bounce back. And if they don't have the season that they're hoping for, then I still think that a Gaudreau trade, until he's extended, is certainly possible. The fact we've gone the entire offseason with no Johnny Gaudreau extension tells me at this point the Flames are not entirely committed, at least it appears that way, to extending him. So until that happens, I think a trade is still reasonable. If you look around their roster here, Monahan's not tradable right now, in my opinion, until he shows he can play again after the surgery and the down years. They don't really want to trade like Matthew Tkachuk or Elias Lindholm. You've got Johnny Gaudreau as the next guy that's got the most amount of value. They lost Giordano in expansion. Like, to me, Gaudreau is your main trade chip, but it's either you extend him or you trade him. They have to do one or the other. And I honestly said going into this offseason that one of those two things needed to happen before we got to now. And it hasn't. So, again, I think it's a fact that they're weighing all options or trying certain things. They just have not been able to materialize a deal that works for them. So I expect them to continue to be working on that. And as Francis points out here, that it's certainly quite possible that if you see the Flames get off to a slow start here, especially, but let's say Gaudreau is playing really well, but the team overall isn't, that's going to create a value for him, more in the trade market, but it's also going to create more of a need for the team to continue to shake things up. And as I've stated a few times talking about the upcoming season preview, so my Calgary video on that and other things, I personally have a limited amount of confidence in this team going into the year. Like, to me, they're in a weak division. I think they can still be in the middle of the pack there, maybe have a shot at playoffs. But at the end of the day, I don't know. Like, they're still going to have Vegas. They're going to have Edmonton. They're going to have even Seattle, to me, could very well be a threat to make the playoffs. You get Vancouver, looks like they've made some interesting moves. I'm not sure really quite what to make of them. And obviously they got some big RFAs too that are still unsigned, which could impact things too. So we don't know where that's going to go yet. So even though they're in a weaker division, it's not a given. So we'll have to see what happens. But I still think if Calgary does not have a great start, but Gaudreau is looking good, personally, that it does increase the likelihood of a trade given the fact that he's not extended. So until he is extended, I think it's a real chance here. Now, on to St. Louis quickly. There's still more talks again that Vladimir Tarasenko likely does start the year with the Blues, or at least goes into camp at the very least. At this point, they still have Robert Thomas to sign. They have their own cap situation they're dealing with. And I think they're still exploring that possibility. But at this point, I think teams probably would feel better before making a trade, like I said about Monahan, seeing this guy play a little bit first. So even if it's not regular season, I would imagine if you see Tarasenko suiting up in a lot of the preseason games, it could very well be a situation where they're showcasing him, trying to get other teams interested. But at this point, it wouldn't be completely shocking. Like I said, if we go into the season with him starting with the Blues, we've heard comments from Craig Berube, we've heard comments from Doug Armstrong, and it just seems more and more likely as each day goes by that that's a real possibility. But again, if he can get into some preseason action, look good, then maybe a deal could be generated before the season actually starts. And if not, again, be looking to give him an opportunity to showcase himself early in the year. And if things are still, relationship-wise, not getting any better, then I would suspect they'll continue to find a way here to try to explore a deal as the year goes on. But at the same time, like I said, they don't necessarily want to trade him for sure if he can mend the relationship and continue to play well. But they also have a cap need too now, so there's other things at play here, and we'll have to see. But it won't be shocking to see Tarasenko start the year as a Blue. Now, lastly, I want to talk about the Wild and Kirill Kaprizov. We had another update from Michael Russo today, writing for The Athletic, talking about the fact that Kaprizov and the Wild, again, we seem to be at a stalemate here, which is not good. At least with a lot of the other RFA situations, there appears to be more ongoing dialogue and more meetings. And with this, it just seems to be, we've had too many situations where things have gone quiet for extended times, and this is now not the time. Training camp opens up here in just a few days. No deal. Plus, like I said, with him being in Russia, we have to go through all the paperwork, work visa-wise, and then to get him over here, that's going to take some time. And I believe they're not completely certain on his vaccination status either, so there's that to sort out. Like, there's a lot of extracurricular stuff that they have to sort out because of where he's coming from and stuff, and that creates an issue. But he did indicate today that the Wild are pretty much only offering a 5-year deal. So if the Kaprizov camp are insisting on a shorter term, which was kind of rumored before, that's going to create a situation where he's likely going to end up holding out, missing camp, or at least part of it, and see what if either side blinks here and creates a deal first. But Guerin basically said once training camp starts, they're going to change their focus to the players that are here, players under contract, and work with what they have. So not to say that they won't talk or won't negotiate, but it's not going to be as big of a priority for him. And of course, we've seen other players in not too distant past hold out, like William Nylander's the main one that comes to mind. That can drag on as late as December 1st before it becomes to the point that they cannot play for the entire season. So we'll see what happens, but things don't sound good. And if the Wild, they've already went from wanting to sign him for 8 years down to 5. It sounds like Kaprizov wants to get to free agency as soon as possible, which is not a good sign at all. I think the Wild are really reluctant to go shorter term with him because they feel that he's just going to end up walking anyway. That's just my gut feeling on how they feel about it. They haven't obviously said that. But still, like I've said before, I can see this possibly ending badly and resulting in a trade. If they get to that point, that another team is either he's more willing to sign with them longer term, or they're willing to give him the short-term deal that he's insisting on, then that could end up resulting in something significant. Like I said before, with a Wild have been linked to Jack Eichel, that would be a big piece that the Buffalo Sabres might actually be interested in. Would he go to Buffalo? I have no idea. That's just an idea. Hard to say if anything like that would ever materialize, but you'd have to think the Sabres would at least listen if his name is brought up in conversations if they get to that point, which to me, I'm not so sure are too far away. Like I said, you have to get the feeling here that maybe he just doesn't want to be there. I mean, that's just my personal take on it. Like I said before, there's a lot to think about. Not to say that he hates the team or the area or anything like that, but it's a big culture difference when you come over from some of those European countries like Russia. And, if you don't have any Russian teammates and you're far away from home, and, there's a lot of other factors at play here. And obviously he also is demanding a lot of money because obviously he feels he's worth it, which is, in their eyes justified. And it just creates a bit of a really messy situation. So will he get signed? Will he end up being traded? It's really difficult to say, but I don't have a good feeling about this one. And of all the RFA deals that are pending right now, to me, this one's the most concerning for the team itself. So let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.